Broadcasting from the Unshackled studios in Melbourne. This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net. Now here's Tim Wilms.
Hello everyone and welcome to WilmsFront for 2021, our first show for the new year on this Wednesday, the 3rd of February. We are live on the WilmsFront YouTube and DLive channels, as well as on the Entropy Enhanced software, where you can, throughout the show, ask a question of myself or my guest, or also send through a super chat. It is currently 8:30 p.m. here in Melbourne. This will be the new starting time for the weekly edition of WilmsFront. As was the case in 2020, there will be weeks where there will be special extra shows. The time slots of those extra special episodes will be either Friday or Sunday nights, also at 8:30 p.m. Melbourne time. Well, a lot has changed since my last show before Christmas 2020, which was brought to you from a open and maskless Melbourne pub with my producer, Margot Huss, who is moderating the chat tonight. Us Victorians, we survived a coronavirus outbreak early in the new year without Dan Andrews locking us down again. Despite my own known objections to coronavirus surveillance and QR code check-ins, the Victorian state government's contact tracing proved to be up to standard and passed its biggest test. Over the Australian summer, we saw the people of the northern beaches in Sydney suffer through a 2-week lockdown over the Christmas and New Year period. The people of Brisbane also had their own snap 3-day lockdown over one case of the so-called British super strain. Both Sydney and Melbourne got their first experience with mandatory masks, and in fact Sydney still has mandatory masks in some settings. As January 2021 ended, the city of Perth and 2 other WA regions were the next mainland Australian city to be subjected to a snap lockdown after an infected security guard spent 2 days in the Perth community after falling ill with the virus on the Thursday. So he was tested on the Saturday, and so Mark McGowan announced on Sunday around about lunchtime Perth time, after he'd kept the coronavirus out for 10 months through a mixture of a hard border with the rest of Australia, issuing the biggest COVID fines in Australia, and even imprisoning quarantine breakers. He hit the panic button immediately. He gave the residents of Perth only several hours' notice. They'd be under house arrest and forced to wear masks for 5 days. So, as has happened in Adelaide and Brisbane before their snap lockdowns and panic buying occurred throughout the city, the return to school for 2021 in Perth has been delayed a week. And of course, wedding, funeral and event plans have been thrown into disarray. Now, I thought for the first show back, it would be good to learn what it's been like for the residents of Perth experiencing this snap lockdown, which since the first national lockdown ended 9 months ago, they have been living as close to a pre-COVID life as possible from their isolated state with no masks or QR codes for most of that time. So my guest for tonight will provide us with her perspective. Tanya Stapleton has worked in the fine industry for over 20 years. Throughout that time, she has had the pleasure in helping people fulfill their hopes and dreams. She's a passionate critical thinker who takes much pride in learning about the complexities of our world. She believes in freedom of speech is the cornerstone of our society, and the bane of our existence is the lack of media integrity and political manipulation. Tanya, welcome to WilmsFront.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for having me. I'm not sure where to look, actually, but anyway.
Just look straight at the camera.
Yeah.
So you're my first guest for 2021. Thank you so much for making the time tonight, though you do have the whole week free because you're...
Well, at least. I don't think we're going to get away with it that lightly, even in spite of the fact that there's been no other people testing positive from it, from all the testing that's been going on. I think if you watch the Mark McGowan press conference today, he sort of, and yesterday's basically alluded to that, if we're lucky and if there's no one else testing positive to the most virulent strain in the world on Friday, then he will ease up on some of the restrictions, which is great because that makes a lot of sense.
So he's implied that if there's a positive tomorrow or Friday, the lockdown clock resets again.
Well, yeah, basically that's what he has said. And even if there isn't, then he will ease some of the restrictions. So, one of them that I think maybe he could ease up on is, I don't know, if you're exercising alone or riding your bike, maybe you shouldn't have to wear a mask because you're alone.
But at least you don't have to wear a mask when you're driving your car solo, like the residents of Brisbane had to do during their 3-day lockdown.
That's actually in there as well. That one's in there. I was pretty shocked by that. You do have to actually wear a mask in your vehicle. The option is if you don't wear your mask in your vehicle, it must be easily accessible if it's and you must be able to put it on as soon as required. So, if you get pulled over for not wearing a mask. As long as you have one close by and you can put it on, that's okay. Because you're alone in your car.
Obviously, all this, we call it cultural masking madness, began with Dan Andrews' mask mandate, which began, see, I lived through the world's longest lockdown here in Melbourne, 112 days. And yes, it was as horrible as other people in other cities and states imagined it. July 23 was when it came in, and so you had to wear it everywhere as soon as you left the house. The only place outside of your home you didn't have to wear it was if you were driving your car either alone or with members of your household. And if you were in an office building working and you were the only person there, but obviously that had to be a permitted office workplace as well. For example, if you're an executive producer of a fake news network in your office and it's closed, you can take your mark off.
But did you get JobKeeper and JobSeeker? That's what I want to know for your news network. Could you have applied?
Me? Well, I was working throughout all the second lockdown here from I refer to it as my news bunker studio. We had to shut down our proper studio during 2020 because of the lockdown. So I've been broadcasting since that time. From home, so doing that work from home.
Work from home, yes, nice.
Yeah, and bringing in guests such as yourself remotely because, obviously during the lockdowns can't bring in guests into the studio or bringing guests from interstate because
for sure.
I hardly think that Melbourne and Perth residents have been able to mix much because McGowan, it was just before Christmas, he relaxed the hard border, but when the Northern Beaches outbreak came to Victoria, he backdated the 14-day period to the Black Rock Thai restaurant from the 21st. So I'm not sure how he made it so his authorities were going to hunt down and track all the Victorians who'd made it through there and take them away to hotel quarantine.
Yes, we got the I mean, I think there's a lot of questions when we look at the way things have been done, and I get it. It's obviously very hard when you're in the situation where things are evolving and changing all the time, and you come up with a decision and you think it's great, but has it been really that well thought through? I mean, I think sometimes it's easier for someone who's from the outside looking in and kind of going, that doesn't make any sense, but maybe when you're on the inside looking out, you don't you can't see it what everyone else can see. So, if people have already been in the community for a certain period of time and they're requesting that they go into lockdown, then wouldn't you really be saying, well, what about all the people that they were associating with and everywhere they went? Wouldn't that really just like cause a massive cascade of lockdowns? And I think, regardless of what, especially what we've seen, obviously the situation's different in different parts of the world, but Australia is obviously isolated, and we've got we live a very small population in a very big country. So, relatively speaking, we are definitely one of the better places for it to be. And also with our weather and climate, we have to think that just because of the way the rest of the world has responded to certain things doesn't necessarily mean to say that needs to be, we don't need to compete with them on how hard it is.
In terms of how hard, are you talking about lockdowns or the virus itself?
Well, mandated mask wearing and things like that. I mean, it's to me that's the biggest, most ridiculous thing I've seen. I can get it. I will understand, and I know, if you're going into a shop where it's busy, okay, even though it's only one person, and people can say, yeah, but it all started off with one person, and then look where we are in the world today. And by rights, I mean, in my opinion, if it is so easily spreadable, then pretty much everyone in Australia should already have it. And wearing a mask wouldn't stop that. We've already seen from patient 903, as he's been dubbed in America, with the UK, the most virulent strain. He's gone to over 100 different places, and they've basically been contract tracing him and doing all those kind of things, and yet still nobody has tested positive. Wouldn't you just say rationally that, I mean, how have you reached this conclusion that it is the most contagious when he can go to all these places? And I know people will not like this, but if he's gone to all these places and he's seen all these people, he's done all these things, surely by now they would have probably found someone, I don't know, maybe even his housemates may have actually developed it, his family, his immediate friends, anyone?
Well,
Nope.
Let's go back to the Brisbane 3-day lockdown, which was triggered by that cleaner out in the Brisbane community who contracted the UK super strain. And so because it's deemed to be 70% more transmissible, that's what they're told, and there's so many unknowns, that's why Palachuk, that's the nickname that we give her, decided with Jeanette Young to do this circuit breaker lockdown, and we found out that the only other person this cleaner had infected was their partner, which obviously partners quite intimate with each other, usually sleep in the same bed, so I'm not surprised, but that was the only person. And so far this security guard in Perth has infected no one.
Yeah, exactly, which is obviously great. No one's complaining about that. It's fantastic. But when I was trying to, when you sort of said that you were going to be talking about the UK strain, I went online and tried to find actual scientific stats of or verification of how that it's been reached at 70% and a 70% more contagious, and you can't actually find anything. It's just it seems to be that this is what the media has determined. It is now 70% more contagious. I did find an article in the International Business Times in the UK where basically they've quoted the Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies in the UK, SAGE as they're otherwise known as, and those scientists have stated that they are only 50% sure that it is more deadly. They're only 50% sure that it's more deadly. I mean,
these strains.
No, this is in the UK, the Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies in the UK, who advise the government there on the course of action in related to. So I've written this down in relation to the government making decisions during an emergency. So even the scientists there are only 50% sure that it is more. It is worse than the original strain, and that's a scientist.
You have to remember that when the pandemic hit the West. It was March 2020. That's 1 month after the Northern Hemisphere winter. And obviously places such as Italy, New York got hit really badly first, and then the UK did. And so it's the grips of the Northern Hemisphere winter at the moment, December, January, and now February. So given that flu-like viruses are seasonal, it's not surprising that it's much more highly transmissible, and it's proved to be more deadly during the Northern Hemisphere winter. Yeah. And that's why the UK, they look like they're on track to beat the Melbourne lockdown record. They're told that they won't get out of lockdown until the end of March. And having experienced that lockdown as a Melburnian, it does crush your hope, demoralize you. Like when we were getting, Dan was announcing those 700 cases per day. It's like, why bother getting out of bed in the morning? Like there's nothing, like what's there to do? But the announcement of these cases, like obviously it's tragedy when people die or severely sick. But my thinking was, with this amount of cases, Dan's going to keep us in lockdown for a long time, and I was not that wrong. And definitely, the lockdown is what myself and plenty of other people fear when they hear about new cases, that this is going to lead to a lockdown. And now the standard's been set in Brisbane and Perth. 1 case of an alleged super strain and then lockdown.
And definitely that's certainly what which I know from socially and things like that, because Perth has enjoyed like a relatively normal existence for the large majority of it. Obviously we've watched back in Melbourne and just kind of gone, it's just terrible, and I couldn't imagine it. And for anywhere that's doing those massive sort of lockdowns, I can't imagine it myself. And so I'm not complaining about a week or 2 weeks or whatever it is, because it's still better than what most have had. Do I agree with it? Not necessarily, but it's where we are.
Obviously, the reason why the Perth populace at large has been compliant and understanding is, and supportive of their leader, Mark McGowan, is because, well, we don't want to end up like Melbourne. And they also haven't, the first lockdown that you had in Perth during the national lockdown wasn't that severe. Obviously the state was divided up into those 9 regions, and so it's easy to sell a short, sharp lockdown to a populace that hasn't really had a severe lockdown like Melbourne has.
100%. Yeah. And that's what I think the thing is as well, is because people are just going, well, look, if we just toe the line now, then this can be all done and dusted in about 5 days, maybe, and then we can just go back to going to the pub or going out and doing everything as normal. And I do think that is the general consensus. It's like, people are basically sort of saying, well, it's a very small ask compared to what other people have had to do. And yes, it is a very small ask compared to what other people had to do. However, that's the whole point. It doesn't mean to say that it should take away the rational point of the actual exercise either, because whilst we've been lucky, it doesn't mean to say that this makes sense doing this for one case. Maybe like even for a couple of days, if his housemates had tested positive and things like that, then we can see that there is a broader transmission where it could be more a potential risk. Once again, okay, but you narrow it in onto day 3 and there's still nothing, and then for him to in my mind almost threaten people with basically, well, even if there's still no cases by Friday, I might move some. I think that's a little bit socially irresponsible, in my opinion, for the health or mental health of the citizens of anywhere.
Because even though it's 5 days, that means that all hospitality, all event or planned events are cancelled. So is community sport. The return of school has been delayed a week. So it is still a huge disruption, and there's already been a thankfully some mainstream media has done some reporting on the people that have missed out on casual shifts during this week because of the lockdown, and they're not going to get JobKeeper payments for that. And we have the federal government, they're going to be ending JobKeeper anyway in March, I think, to communicate to these state premiers such as yours and Anastasia Palaszczuk that if you want to snap lockdown again, it's on you. And of course, if you do get out of it soon, I hope, then there's always that anxiety. If there's another case, is that another snap lockdown?
Exactly. And it's a level of fear mongering that keeps going on because people want to keep things as normal as possible. And I think people have always wanted to do the right thing. And they have. People are doing their best. But I think too, it ends up also becoming a little bit like the story of the boy who cried wolf. There's only so many times that you can keep pulling these types of things out, and whether it be here, whether it be in Queensland, whether it be in Melbourne, where eventually the people are going to get sick of it. There's only so many times you can say, just do it this time, just do it that time, until the people will say, hold on, it's not making any sense.
And this is why it's refreshing at the beginning of the year when the Northern Beaches outbreak came to Melbourne, that Dan Andrews didn't shut down. In fact, he still continued his holiday on the Mornington Peninsula. It was great not having the Daily Dan during the outbreak. The only rollback of restrictions were that masks would be in all indoor settings again, which was annoying because if you're going to pay for petrol inside, why do you need to put on a mask for like a 30-second transaction? And the reduction of visitors to the private home from 30 per day to 15. Probably the biggest panic decision they made was closing the New South Wales border completely, but border closures was not something that they'd ever thought about or had to deal with. But as I said in my introduction, the state's new contact tracing system it was fit for purpose. It got on top of the outbreak, isolated contacts of contacts, as Jerome Weimar, our testing commander, said, after quite a few chaotic days at testing sites with 6-7 hour waits. So they were able to expand the testing sites and process more tests. And now we're 28 days without community transmission. And so I think that having gone through that outbreak and not have significant restrictions in place, let alone a lockdown, that I think was a big sigh of relief. I think even the people in government would have been pleased with how that occurred, with hardly any disruption at all. No venues had to close at all.
Yeah, I think in this particular case, I mean, the whole point, which I can't understand, is the whole, if you are walking alone, if you are doing anything alone, not in the city, not anywhere, even just, in your neighborhood suburb, you are supposed to wear a mask as soon as you leave your house. Now, if you're alone, I'm sorry, I cannot understand the rationale behind that. If you are driving in your car alone, you're still expected to wear a mask. I mean, these types of things don't make any sense. The locking down of the Peel region, which, Margaret River is like 4.5 hours away from the CBD, locking these places down as well. I mean, that just makes no sense for one case. No sense. Please tell me if you think it does.
No, it doesn't. You'll get no disagreement from me. And this was the stupid mask rule that we had to put up with for nearly 4 months. That even if you were out alone in the open air, you still had to wear a mask. I saw that you got yourself your mask for the lockdown here.
Yes. Probably didn't go too far away from home in that one, though.
Well, those type of masks, they're a lot more comfortable and breathable, I will say. And And I noticed also that during lockdown, you've embraced contactless delivery with Dan Murphy's. He was Dan Murphy was definitely a lot of Melburnians' favourite Dan during our lockdown.
Yes. Well, interestingly enough, a friend from Queensland who went through one of the snap lockdowns over there, he pre-ordered that and sent that over for me here because he knew that he just was like going, he knew that I'd be like going, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. But once again, whether it's a week or 2 weeks, it is what it is. But yeah, it's very hard when you're kind of like going, that just doesn't make sense. That's the thing. It's the frustration more so than anything else. It's kind of like going, because you have absolutely no control over it. You have no say. And you basically, enforced with, by violating these things, you could be getting up to a $50,000 fine. A business can get up to a $250,000 fine. And so, when you just see that basically you literally have no rights but to do exactly as what you're told, I think it's very, very wrong.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that when they introduced the National Cabinet that masks had to be worn at airports on airplanes. In Sydney, Brisbane and Victoria, the mask fine is $200. On Perth, at Perth airports and the airwaves, it's $50,000. And this applies to anyone who's in a vehicle, including drivers and passengers picking up someone from the airport who has to quarantine and wear a mask. Like, that's absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And McGowan's fines since the beginning have been the most severe. He's even sent people to jail for breaching quarantine. There was that dentist who got sentenced to prison for treating patients instead of self-isolating, even though tested negative. Even in Victoria, nobody's gone to jail for a COVID breach. And you've had in the first day of a lockdown a WA man, a 41-year-old from Ellenbrook, arrested and charged for refusing to wear a mask. Police alleged the man he was not wearing a mask outside a shopping centre on the Great Eastern Highway, refused to when directed by officers. And he's been denied bail and will face a magistrate's court on the 19th. So he's on remand for not wearing a mask. And as far as I know, he didn't assault police officers or anything like that.
Yeah, and that's what we're faced with, really. Like the absolute, the smashing down. Really, it's not. And I've seen different posts and things like that from social media where people are going, "Oh, if you have a problem with it, you're a Karen or whatever." And it's kind of like going, and this is a lot of like the younger, what I would say, the more woke folk, are kind of like all into do it for the team. And it's like, yeah, that's okay. But, let's make everything fair and equitable. And, because there is obviously the limitations, or if you suffer from anxiety or have disabilities, things like that, where you don't have to wear a mask. But the problem is the way that this is all being done. It's in such a way that if you go outside without a mask, you're basically one step away from killing every single person in the radius of 50 kilometres, which is not the case. So for people that do suffer from anxiety, depression, or PTSD, which are allowable reasons to not have to wear a mask, you don't have to provide proof. That's what it says legally, but the problem is socially you're condemned, and so why leave your house?
That was certainly the case when the mask mandate was first introduced in Melbourne. When I'm not sure if you remember the so-called Bunnings Karens who shopped there without masks and went viral online. But even though we still have mandatory masks in large retail settings, public transport, and shopping centres, there's no mask carrying anymore. There's many more people maskless in supermarkets and shopping centres now, but there's no conflicts over it now. Everyone just if you want to wear a mask, wear it. If you don't, well, nobody's approaching them, not other customers, security. I haven't heard of anyone getting a mask fine in the past few months, even though it is still mandatory under public health orders to wear one. So we've sort of reached that sort of time where just people are leaving each other alone. But in your city, in Sydney and Brisbane, certainly the police have taken quite the enforcement measures, and certainly it's caused conflict at various venues.
Interestingly enough, today what started doing the rounds on social media, in the back channels, it's not funny. Well, it is funny, actually. I thought it was very funny. Back in April 2020, the Channel 9 News did a feature on normal, healthy people shouldn't be wearing masks.
Yes.
And this was actually Roger Cook was interviewed for that, the Deputy Premier, who literally stated normal, healthy people should not wear masks. And yet, here we are, 2021, normal, healthy people should wear masks.
And we had back in April the God Dr. Anthony Fauci say that wearing a mask wasn't effective against containing COVID-19 droplets, and then recently he came out and said that double masking is just common sense, though now he's had to concede that there's no data indicates that double masking is effective, though he said if it makes you feel good and more secure, then you should do it, which is not something I'd expect from the most highly paid person in the US public service, that just on a hunch says, well, it's just common sense.
And then I think he's even said that wearing 3 masks will even be 90% more effective. But my point would be starting to wonder, at what point do people stop being actually able to breathe at all? I mean, because that's going to be 100% effective against COVID once people can't actually breathe. COVID will be the last of their problems because they'll be dead.
I noticed that many of the Black Lives Matter protesters, and during the Invasion Day demonstrations, I'm not sure what your views are on Australia Day, here in Melbourne, Avi Yemeni, before he was detained and moved across town, interviewed an Invasion Day protester, had a mask on that said, I can't breathe. And, well, when do you can't breathe properly if you're wearing that mask?
Exactly. That would be your direct limitation right there. Yeah. I mean, obviously going a little bit off track, but the reality is I was actually talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he'd been out the night before the Australia Day, and he'd woken up on someone's lounge at 11 a.m. and was making his way back home, and he ran into the Australia Day protesters, and he couldn't help but notice is that virtually none of them were actually Aboriginal. Or, maybe I could, of course, identify as Aboriginal, although as far as you almost worried about saying something wrong here, but he said the Aboriginal families that he saw heading out to go and have picnics and things like that, like going, hey, happy Australia Day, where there were a big contingent of people that were actually complaining about it, appeared to actually not even be of Aboriginal descent.
Yeah, so that's exactly the same with our Melbourne Invasion Day and Black Lives Matter protesters.
Yeah, I would say I am of Aboriginal descent, and one of my cousins actually did a great post on Facebook, and I was kind of like, high five. She said, at the end of the day, nobody can change what's happened in the past. What we all need to be focusing on now and going forward is making Australia a better place for everyone in it, regardless of what colour creed you are. And I'm kind of like going, that is just the point blank common sense. We can't go back and change it. everybody's sorry about what happened in the past, but unless you've got a time machine, you're not going to be able to fix it. We've got to fix what going forward.
History is complex, and there's hardly any pure noble people throughout history. They've all done some things wrong.
100%, and each group or whatever has their irks, things or people they have beef with, but yeah, we can't change it. We've just got to work on going forward. And at the moment, I think that this is another big problem as well, is the segregation of people in society is actually, we're spending more time focusing on our differences than what we are on our similarities. And bottom line is, we all like our friends, we all like our families, we all go to work, we all do we live exactly the same lives. And, we all care about the same things. And we all want everyone to be happy. And I don't see why we spend so much time on looking at the ways that we are so different when there are more things that make us similar.
Yeah, it's been the most unfortunate development over the past 10 years, this polarization of everything in society, people unfriending people because they believe this, that when they're deemed a hater or racist or whatever for believing in that. Or the new thing is you're a conspiracy theorist if you question anything to do with the lockdowns or the COVID vaccines. Yeah. And we saw today Craig Kelly, who's the Liberal member for Hughes, which is a federal seat in southwestern Sydney. Scott Morrison finally capitulated to the media and Labor mob by giving, it's the media that reported this, a dressing down. So he's Craig Kelly has said that he supports the vaccine rollout. So and that he'll sort of be quiet from now on. We'll see how this plays out. But Craig Kelly on his Facebook page has been talking about hydroxychloroquine and
no one could say it. Don't worry.
Inverness as alternate treatments for COVID-19, and they may be a thing to look at, not just the vaccines.
Oh, 100. Well, I agree with him completely, because in the end, I've spent a lot of time going and looking how the virus affects the cells of the body, how the vaccine, only the Pfizer vaccine, I've only looked at that one, so I haven't looked at all of them. And then I've looked at the HCQ and ivectorin, which I can't say any of these words. But basically, if you understand how they work and how they affect the cellular structure, it actually makes a lot of sense. Where the Pfizer vaccine causes your body to create a protein that it's not actually doing beforehand in order to, put a shield around the actual the virus itself to help it stop affecting other cells. No one knows what having your body produce proteins that it wasn't doing before, what kind of long-term effect that will have, where you've got two other viable options, and there's been numerous studies done on them. Even Facebook now have apologized for basically blacklisting anyone who spoke in support of HCQ, and yeah, they've even apologized for it now. I remember one of the leading scientific publications, starts with an L, I can't think what it's called right now, but they basically put out a paper which was slamming the use, saying that it was irresponsible. They've also publicly retracted that. And now the US now are starting to prescribe it as well for their people. We obviously know that India is also using ivermectin and HCQ as well as a combination, is putting that out. It's a much cheaper alternative. But once again, although I'm not a scientist, I can read, I can watch things. If you understand and look at how it works in the supporting the cells against blocking the virus in entering, and then basically destroying the virus if it has actually inserted itself inside the cell, has gotten in, it does work. It literally makes sense. And so what I don't understand is, instead of like shutting these things down and calling everyone conspiracy theories, if there are enough doctors and things like that, then why aren't we actually looking at it and saying, maybe there's something here? Maybe we don't need to use an untried, untested vaccine that has no long-term studies or results. Maybe there are other options, and we should make that open to everyone. And our scientists here should be encouraged to understand and do research on that. And to me, that's science.
Sorry if I seemed a bit distracted there, because we've just had some breaking news. This afternoon, Victorian Police Minister and COVID Hotel Quarantine Minister Lisa Neville reported that another hotel quarantine or person in hotel quarantine had tested positive for the virus and caught it from another person on that hotel room level. Just received this breaking news from the Herald Sun that a new positive case of COVID has been detected in a hotel quarantine worker. So Victoria's public health team is investigating, close contacts being notified. More details throughout the evening. It comes as authorities believe a mutant strain of the coronavirus has floated between rooms in one of Victoria's quarantine hotels. That's at the Royal Park Hotel. A family of 5 who arrived at Park Royal on January 20 were moved to a health hotel after testing positive. A woman whose room was across the hall from the family tested positive to an identical strain of coronavirus on January 27th. The woman had been in hotel quarantine since January 11th. She's had her quarantine extended. Review of CCTV has found that the family did not breach quarantine and there was no crossover. Police Minister Lisa Neville said the working assumption was that the viral load from the family room was so high that when it spread to the family, that it spread from the family's room when the door was open during food deliveries. That sounds like quite you would say quite an extraordinary thing to develop, that you just open the door and this virus blasts out. But that triggered my anxiety hearing that. But obviously we hope that the Andrews government repeats the actions that they conducted in the start of January and doesn't go with the new Palaszczuk-McGowan model.
Yeah. And once again, then I think then, if anything, that maybe they can take some comfort from, well, see, this is once again, this doesn't make sense, because literally you've had a man that's been diagnosed or, been tested positive with the same, strain, wandering around for 2 days and no one else coming up with it. So, if you say, well, okay, the virus quickly ran out the door when the door opened, when they opened up to get food, and then eventually that other person opened up their door, and then because it waited by the door, and then they opened the door, and then the virus got in that way. I mean, it's not impossible. Doesn't seem particularly plausible, but why are they reporting on things like this without actually having, and this is the biggest problem with the reporting of all of this, they're actually putting this information out before they actually even know what they're talking about. They're coming up with different, philosophies and processes and of the way that it could have happened. And once again, they call everyone else a conspiracy theorist who doesn't agree with them. And it's like, well, you haven't even researched or proven anything yet yourself.
And you'll remember with the Adelaide snap lockdown.
Oh, yes, that was hilarious.
Which this was when I think the UK variant was first talked about. Their chief public health officer over there, Nicola Spurrier, claimed she based this super strain theory over the fact that it was being transmitted on pizza boxes, because the pizza worker who was part-time security guard didn't want to confess to the authorities that he had this other job because of affect his visa conditions, because he was a foreign foreign student, they were initially going to have a 6-day lockdown, but cut it to 3 days and blamed their pizza box transmission theory on him lying to contact tracers.
Yeah.
And despite the humiliation of the Premier Stephen Marshmallow, that's the nickname that he's got. This circuit breaker lockdown, well, it's been replicated in Brisbane and now Perth as well.
Yeah, thanks for starting that. That was genius. I mean, I still remember watching that press conference, and I was like, I believe it was like, it's in all the nations, in all the land, we have the worst strain that's ever existed. And I was like going, wow, sounds bad. And then having to come out a couple of days later and say, oh, sorry, complete mistake, as you were. Like, wonderful.
And this, well, I don't know if it's going to be termed a community transmission of this hotel quarantine worker. We don't know if they're a doctor there or they're a police officer there, because we have no security guards this time after what happened last time. It's all Victoria police officers. We have 1,000 Victoria police officers guarding hotel quarantine, and there was another 1,000 at the border during the time that the border was closed, and then Dan Andrews introduced that new traffic light permit system. So they've touted their relaunched hotel quarantine as the best in the nation because and it's been exposed in other cities, Adelaide, Brisbane and Perth. They haven't implemented the new National Cabinet standards. So at least Dan Andrews, given that the first hotel quarantine program, everything that could go wrong did go wrong, that he's corrected those mistakes, but this is obviously quite a blow. But it's also worth making the point that this incident comes a day after he wanted to extend his power to declare a state of emergency in Victoria for another 9 months.
Yeah, and this is like what's unfortunate, because we are actually, I mean, we didn't have any community local transmission for 10 months, and yet I believe we're still operating under a state of emergency, and now we still will be. Which, if you look into the Public Health Acts, what's written into those are actually pretty disturbing. In regards to things like the vaccines and things like that, because whilst the state is under a state of emergency, then we can be enforced to have vaccinations whether or not we do or do not want them.
Well, your Public Health Act in WA is the absolute worst. It went viral.
Oh, great. Yay.
Last year, about how your Public Health Act explicitly said that a person's underwear could be removed, and given that we now have the anal swabs currently being conducted in China as part of they say improved PCR test. Obviously, our Premier Dan Andrews is close with China, but so is your Premier Mark McGowan. Is he going to start enforcing that on people?
Yeah, and because the whole point with the PCR test anyway, and the reason why they're basically scraping your brain is because they're saying that the virus starts there before it starts anywhere else. So that's why we basically have to touch the back of your head with a stick and scrape it, because that's where the virus starts. So please explain to me how the virus now starts on your ass. This does not make any sense.
Health professional who said that coronavirus could be transmitted through farts, which I know this because we've had masks in Melbourne for so long, but even when wearing a mask, you can still smell a fart. So the mask doesn't protect you from a fart as well. But
if it could just do one thing, at least just that.
Well, Australia has been the world leader in the sewage surveillance, which is testing poo. But they've always asked people to get tested when they've found fragments in the sewage, but it's never led to a confirmed case. And now we've heard about how people can shed the virus for many months, even though they're not infectious, which leads people to believe, especially since we had so many cases in Victoria, over 20,000 people caught the virus, that, yeah, there's bound to be some viral shedding in the sewage in Victoria.
Yeah. Wow. That's interesting.
Well, it's
Is that scientifically based by any chance? Like
the sewage surveillance.
Yeah, like the shedding of the virus months after, hence why it's now showing up in the because.
Well, that's the conclusion that I come to by the fact that none of the sewage positives has led to a confirmed positive case in those areas. Like they always encourage people to get tested where the sewage is positive, yet it hasn't led to a positive.
Maybe just the right person wasn't tested.
Well, there's always that again. I mean, there could have been a whole lot more people in Victoria who contracted the coronavirus but never got tested because they
didn't know they had it.
Yeah. That's only the people that they test. The positive.
Exactly.
Well, the only ones who are confirmed positive are those that they've tested. And what's termed a mystery case is they got it from an unknown source, which is somebody who wasn't tested. And you recall that the Northern Beaches outbreak, they never tracked down patient 0, who they deemed had a US strain, or the genomic sequencing did.
Yep, it's certainly interesting times. I remember when COVID first came out, and it was the full. There was the patient 0 where they interviewed this woman, and it basically talked about how she has invariably spread the disease by, basically tracing her movements to over 400,000 people. And I just think, when I think back of listening to that, because I was kind of like going, oh, that's bad. But then we come back to Australia, and we look at the people that have had it, and it just hasn't spread that far. I mean, obviously, we're probably lucky with the weather, and the fact that we live in larger homes and have a lot more space and things like that. So we're not all like bunched in together. Perhaps that's it. Who knows? But I think with what's happened with this snap lockdown is, I don't mind the lockdown. I'm not going to complain about that. But when we actually had COVID here, where we had hundreds and hundreds of people with it, did we wear masks then? No. Could we go out walking? Yes. We could do all those things without masks. And that was for hundreds and hundreds of cases. And now for one person, that's where it's lost me.
Yeah, this is why I've always maintained that masks don't work, because, well, how did we eliminate the virus the first time without masks? But we absolutely need masks to eliminate it the second time. Now,
history already speaks for itself. We were already fine prior without masks the first time, and then people say, "Oh yeah, but this one's so much more worse." And obviously, there's news articles now where it's like the virus has gone out one door, waited, then gone through another door. I mean, that's going to install a world of fear into many, many people, and that's going to see things like masks staying around for a while, I expect, which means I'm just going to have to be staying home for like ever.
Well, going back to the vaccines, which were we were first told that the vaccines would allow us to go back to normal, but now we're being told that there's multiple vaccines, but they still don't know if any of them prevent transmission or are effective against the super strains. We did hear that the Oxford AstraZeneca one, there's some promising signs that prevents transmission, which is good news. That's the key there. And it was telling yesterday that Dan Andrews said, oh, even though we've got the vaccines, there's still lots of unknowns. That's why I need this blank check power to... He claims that's the only way to enforce hotel quarantine, extending the state of emergency, when he could just pass a law, Hotel Quarantine Act.
Yes, exactly. But that doesn't control the whole public. The reality is from what I've looked at, is the Pfizer one, well, anyway, because that's the only one that I've really looked at, because I believe that that's definitely coming hard and fast here. That will not stop people actually getting the virus. It will hopefully stop it actually infecting the cells and creating the sickness, but therefore there's no reason why that would actually and you can see it. Fauci's already said it. He's interviewed with the in the US, basically saying that it doesn't matter what the vaccine you have, you'll still be required to socially distance, you'll still be required to wear masks, and yeah, so basically the whole point is, okay, well, if this is what you're saying, that it may not stop community transmission, it may not stop anything, you still have to wear masks, you still have to socially distance, all that sort of stuff. And then, you're point blank ignoring the other options. What I don't understand is, from a government perspective, as any good leader should, if they really cared about the people, they should be saying, okay, well, let's actually look at these options. And I just don't feel, well, maybe they are doing it, but then why do they, someone like Craig Kelly, why are they just basically calling him an ignorant fool, who's a conspiracy theorist and who's not respecting his own political party? Why are they doing that if they are looking at other options? But it's very hard when you spend $3.4 billion or whatever it is on vaccines. You're kind of going to have to get your money back somehow, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. And it's right to call them experimental vaccines, because they've conceded we don't know how they're going to work amongst the mass populace.
I don't know if you saw the video, and what I think is really interesting is, if you go to the CDC website, there is actually a section, there's the VAERS section, which I do understand is it's not legally required to actually to report cases there. It is optional, and private citizens can also report their adverse reactions to this particular site. And the most interesting thing was, which, by the way, making a false report is a jailable offence. So, perhaps maybe not all of these stories are true, but I went and did a search from March 2020 and put in basically all adverse / death reactions occurred since March 2020 to year to date yesterday. I was able to download that, able to save it as a PDF. I went to print it because I thought I'd have a bit of a read through, but that came out at 235 pages of people having adverse reactions. And I was reading through some of the COVID ones. It was a lot, definitely a lot of elderly people who have had the vaccine had died.
Yes.
Some people were saying, okay, yes, but they've died not from the vaccine, they've died from their pre-existing medical conditions. Some were saying, well, no, they probably really died from COVID. Some were saying that they would have died anyway. But interestingly enough, with the average age of COVID deaths around the world sitting at 80, people have gone above and beyond to protect the elderly citizens with doing things like lockdowns and trying to minimise the chance of them catching it. Yet they seem to be quite happy to give them the vaccine and then say that they didn't die from the pre-existing conditions, when they died with COVID, they died of COVID, not their pre-existing conditions. So this is another one of those things where it's like, well, you really can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't be one way bantering it around this way, and then when it's going against you to say now it's this.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, why is it so sensationalized when an elderly person has died with COVID, not necessarily from COVID, that justifies all the lockdowns and restrictions. But when an elderly person dies after taking the vaccine, it could be correct that them taking the vaccine had nothing to do with them dying. But how come that's just no big deal? Where if they died with COVID, it's the biggest deal in the world.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's just more than enough to make you wonder. But anyway, like I was reading through a lot of them, and there's a lot for both the Moderna and Pfizer vaccine. Once again, though, it obviously comes down to you have to consider, okay, well, if millions of people have had it, then maybe it's not that bad. But once again, this is not a compulsory reporting platform, so it was quite a disturbingly large number of people, I thought, that had died after having the vaccine or within a couple of weeks of having the vaccine who were considered to be perfectly healthy before that. So, yeah, to me, I think people have the right to be cautious with it, and I think they should also have the right not to have it and not be guilted into doing it, whether it be through not being able to travel and all of those sort of things, which we know that's what's going to happen. It's going to be the case of, well, you'll be forced into it one way or another, or they'll definitely try that, which I think is rather unfortunate.
We're one of the few nations in the world which bans its citizens from leaving the country under the Federal Biosecurity Act, and which has many Australians still stranded overseas, unable to come home. But given all these hotel quarantine breaches, the sense I get from the Australians that are here is that, well, if you haven't got back to Australia by now, tough luck. You've had nearly a year. We're not going to risk the virus escaping because of you returning.
It's just not even easy. It's not even easy to get here. Even if you can, you've got to apply to get in. You've got to be able to get on a limited flight. You've got to be able to try and get accepted into the country as well. And then you've got to be prepared to stay in some hotel that's not of your choice. I mean, obviously, people can say, "Oh, well, that's just terrible," so sad for them. But applying to get back into your own country in 2020, I mean, 2021 even, I mean, where are we at?
Yeah, there's still a lot to play out, and it's clear from, well, Scott Morrison has said himself, even if you take the vaccine, you're not going to be able to get on a plane right away, which basically said, like, there seems to be no immediate benefit to taking the vaccine, this experimental vaccine, and so what benefit is there to taking it?
Yeah, 100%. I can't see any. And I think that's the biggest problem in Australia as well, is because COVID has been relatively mild, and it really has been unfortunately, obviously, I appreciate the fact that people died in Melbourne and primarily in Melbourne, and anyone who did die, it's a terrible thing. But for a lot of people, they would be saying, well, why would I want to take it? It is experimental, and we don't even in the peak of when Melbourne had a lot of cases, it's still a very relatively small number of people compared to the actual population. And but then of course you get the straight cut back of, well, yeah, but if we didn't have lockdowns, then it could have been so much worse. And unfortunately, that's probably something we'll never know, because we won't have the choice to.
Now let's turn for the final portion of the show to the upcoming WA state election, which is on Saturday, the March 13th. The hard border that Western Australia has had with the eastern states has made Mark McGowan immensely popular, and this lockdown that he has subjected you to is because he's throughout the past few months, he's beat his chest, tough talk, saying, my eliminationist hard border approach is the best. New South Wales, with their suppression of approach, they continue to let the virus fester. So when the hotel quarantine security guard tested positive, I guess he had to walk the walk with the lockdown. But even with this massive disruption, It looks like he'll still win, as the immediate snap polls say that the public support the lockdown, and we've seen the WA Liberal opposition, led by Zach Kirkup. He's the third leader the party has had in 4 years, just fall behind the lockdown, saying we support the public health advice, even though I don't think you ever see your chief health officer, Andy Richardson. Every other state's chief health officer is quite prominent, except for WA's, which appears to me that it's more Mark McGowan making the health calls than the actual chief health officer making health advice.
That could also be something to do with the way, I'd have to read it again, the way the Public Health Act is written. There might be some variances there into who's required to deliver, some of these messages, I think.
Now you have the Liberal opposition, basically because they are so terrified of criticising Mark McGowan on his number one issue. There's also the West Australian secessionism, local nationalism, which plays into it. That's, we like this sort of, it's been like a soft secessionism, even though you're still getting the federal JobKeeper and the GST, and the WA state budget is the only one in surplus thanks to mining royalties, though it hasn't been without its costs. The hard border with WA, the headline is misleading. WA's COVID suppression buoys WA's economic performance. They've gone from the 7th best performing economy in Australia to the 6th best.
What a fine achievement. I think everyone's been happy. In the end, I think people have got to the point where people were happy to have the hard border, in the sense of like, it was just like going, you know what, we just don't want that shit here. And basically now that's pretty much why people are prepared to, drop down for 5 days. And I think as long as he pulls back on this in a fair manner, I don't think he's going to really get any pushback, and people will just get on with it. But I think if he's going to, drag it out and say, okay, you're going to have to wear masks for a month, things like that, any rational person is going to have to seriously start looking at it and go, wait, one person and you're doing this to 2 million people. That is ridiculous. I mean, you'd have to get to the point where you'd start wondering, did you order a lot of masks and you really have to get rid of them? Is that what's going on here? Because have you stockpiled a whole heap of shit and you've got to get rid of it? So we're going to wait till you run out, you get your money back? Because there's got to be something else.
Just hold them over to the next pandemic, if there is one in that case.
Yeah, they probably expire because the fabric would get worn out. So I'm sure they only have a short shelf life. So, because you can't go into Coles and a lot of stores unless you're wearing one of the actual medical blue ones. They won't, or the fabric ones. Once again, there hasn't been a lot of or any sort of research confirming that they are actually beneficial. But that's what you have to wear. So you've got to buy these specific ones. So that's what's making me think there is a surplus somewhere and they're going to expire.
I know a lot of other people have that theory as well. Now you have the two major parties basically in lockstep in WA that, if the public health advice says allegedly to go into this lockdown, we're going to go with it. Now, WA has a proportionally represented upper house, so there are minor parties vying for a seat. Are there any minor parties which are questioning I'll call it the McGowan narrative that hard borders, eliminationist, imprisoning and fining people for breaches, that's the only way?
Yeah, there are, but I just unfortunately I don't feel that with the monopoly of the media that he has, the chance of anyone else breaking through that would be impossible. I mean, he gets to speak every day now, and people are tuning in. I mean, I actually watched it today just because you were at the point. Obviously, we do have the bushfires here, and then we have like this rolling case of COVID. So everyone's trying to get information on that to see whether or not it will be dragged out. So he is polarizing basically the media. And so no one to me is going to get a look in. There's not enough time to make any great changes, regardless of the fact of what he brought into the Public Health Act. People are going to be overlooking that.
The Perth bushfires in the Perth Hills, they're getting quite bad, and then there's also flash flooding that's developing in Kalgoorlie. Are you allowed to leave your home if it's on fire?
No, well, if with a mask,
Okay.
you probably can. But I mean, we're a few steps away from the four horsemen of the apocalypse walking down the streets, because I believe there's also a cyclone somewhere offshore as well. So pretty much it's all coming at once. So probably maybe by the weekend we get aliens. They've been predicted to turn up as well.
There's the anal probes now coming, so alien
Exactly.
technology.
Exactly. So yeah, so there's a fair bit to play out, and obviously yeah, I mean,
You mentioned the media. McGowan has such a great platform with the mainstream media. It's worth also highlighting that on the East Coast, people like Kevin Rudd are raging about the Murdoch media monopoly. Though in WA, it's more like a Kerry Stokes media monopoly, because he owns all the newspapers in Western Australia and the local 7 network. And I remember Mark McGowan gave him a special exemption, Kerry Stokes, to come into WA during the hard border, but did not give Clive Palmer one. And Clive Palmer, that's when he went to war with McGowan. His High Court challenge to the WA Public Health Act failed in December. But constitutional experts have said there is still a way to challenge state border closures under the Constitution. But
the Constitution overrides the local.
Well, somebody needs to bring a more succinct case to the High Court next time, rather than Clive Palmer's one. But
this is once again, and the problem that we have with so many of these things is, he has positioned himself as basically like the Australian version of Trump when he was running for office, and the polarizing hate of that man is unfortunately, there's such a huge amount of love, but the polarizing amount of hate, that is what the media focuses on, that's just transferred across to him. So people already think he's some kind of a moronic buffoon, and we're gunning for him not to get in. And so I think there's already a media bias there, which any court challenge that he would have brought up would have failed anyway, because it was probably more so a personality contest.
And Mark McGowan rushed through the Parliament emergency legislation to stop Clive Palmer suing the state over a mining lease dispute, which was quite extraordinary there. And I know that the West Australian newspaper owned by Kerry Stokes has basically been running the biggest campaign against Clive. What was their most iconic headline was active Clive Palmer court cases in Western Australia 7.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, the West Australian, I mean, sometimes I can't. Like, I actually go through and I read the captions and I look through the articles, and I'm just kind of like going, this is why people are so confused about everything. The level of misinformation or partial information or sensationalization, to me it's appalling. And I don't care about any media outlet. They can do whatever they want, but as long as they make it even. Do you know what I mean? But there is just so much significant bias in everything that you just kind of like, it would be impossible for anyone to be able to cut through and actually read the news and come out having learned something anyway.
Having said that, there are some good mainstream media voices against the hard border and the snap lockdown. Carolyn DeRosso, Gemma Tonini, and Jane Marwick. They're all regulars on Sky News. That's how I know who they are. So they provide quite the an important counterbalance there. There, of course, are the small minority of dissenters to Emperor McGowan, but it's good.
Yeah, there just needs to be a fair voice, but I think that it's very hard to get any sort of like fair, even news, and investigative report, even, and things like that are certainly a thing of the past, which I think is very disappointing. It just seems like everyone's sprouting the same information. So, but what are we going to do? This.
Yep. Well, it's important to, and this is what I've been doing. I've been doing the Unshackled for 4.5 years now, but it's been especially important just to put a dissenting voices there. It's becoming increasingly harder with the algorithms on Google and Facebook to put that dissenting view forward and giving a voice to people who are suffering under these economically and personally destructive lockdowns, so that there is the real history of this time period is there on the record.
Yeah. And and I think that everyone, even if people don't like it, whether it be on social media with your family or friends, if you've got an opinion, I think you should be able to share it. And at the end of the day, like, open communication and talking differently about different things with other people is the only way we're going to learn. So hopefully. But I think too, at the same time, sometimes you just kind of like go, you know what, I can't be bothered because I know what you all were going to say, and it's just not even worth it.
Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed chatting with you tonight, Tanya. I hope that you get out of the lockdown by Friday evening. And, well, obviously it's now Victoria where there's a bit of limbo now with this developing story about the hotel quarantine worker tonight, but yes, it's 2021. It looks like it's got a lot of 2020 in it.
There's a lot of 2020 vibes.
Yeah, over in the US, they've just had Groundhog Day, the festivities, which of course was popularized by the movie when the protagonist,
Bill Murray, I think it was.
Phil Connors is the character, lives the same day, and it feels like Groundhog Year. When the clock ticked over to 2021, it was still 2020. Yeah.
All right. Well, it was great to speak with you as well, and good luck with everything. And hopefully we are out Friday, and the world returns to some form of normality sooner rather than later.
And people can follow you on Facebook and Instagram.
Yes, they can. Thank you. And I'll be sure to share this amongst my people.
Yep. And we'll be in contact, and hopefully someday soon, when these borders are all torn down, we can actually meet in Perth. In person. That
would be fantastic. Yes.
And I can meet up with all my Perth friends as well.
Exactly. And we can all get on the beers.
Oh, that's a that's a triggering phrase to me.
I know, right? All right, all the best.
Take care.
You too. Thanks.
All right, that's the first show for WilmsFront 2021. Now, as I said, it will be weekly every Wednesday, 8:30 p.m. Melbourne time, WilmsFront for 2021. But as I said in my introduction, there'll be occasional special shows. The first special show will be this Sunday, 8:30 p.m. Melbourne time on the WilmsFront YouTube and D Live. My guest will be John Ruddick, who is the author of the book Make the Liberal Party Great Again. He is an advocate for a democratisation of the Liberal Party, particularly the New South Wales Liberal Party, opening it up to the members to decide pre-selections and also the party leaders. And he is also, as the title of his book suggests, is a big Trump supporter as well. So I'll be chatting in with about those twin issues. Now, the Unshackled Productions schedule for 2021 is Monday nights. The Brawler on the Brain, hosted by myself and Jared Seaby, over on the Unshackled YouTube channel, 8:30 p.m. Melbourne time. And then on Tuesday, Trad Tasman Talk is back at its old time slot of 7 p.m. on the Unshackled YouTube channel. Then on Thursdays, I'm a panelist on the Dusty Bogans Thirsty Thursday, which is on 8:30 p.m. Melbourne time, 7:30 p.m. Brisbane time, which is simulcast on the Unshackled YouTube channel. And of course, keep checking out the unshackled.net on a regular basis for our news and commentary. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in for the first episode of WilmsFront 2021. It's been a long time since my last show, but I'm glad to be back and back with a series of multiple shows. So you're going to be getting plenty of WilmsFront soon. All right. Good night, everybody. Take care and stay positive.
Thanks for tuning in to WilmsFront. Visit timwilms.com or Rational Rise TV to view the archive of episodes. And keep visiting the unshackled.net to view all our shows and to keep up with the latest real news and analysis.